William Gass's In the Heart of the Country is formulated as a sort of directory of Middle America, clustered in separate sections with labels to denote the content. Gass provides, through the narrator's monologue, a contrast between Middle American cliches and his own literary constructs. Gass's short story begins with an homage to William Butler Yeats's poem, Sailing to Byzantium. Just as Yeats's narrator fled the world of flesh and blood, a world of mortality, in hope to be immortalized like a work of art, so does Gass's narrator. Gass's narrator, however, has become trapped in just what he was attempting to escape: time, the fuse of mortality that burns toward death. The entirety of this short story is an exercise of imagination, an exercise in fictive creation, with the starting line suggesting that the narrator is not only coming to be in the small town, but he is the small town. It is a reflection of himself. Gass is exploiting a structure that undermines the reader's ability to separate the narrator's lived reality with their created fiction. The narrative is formed around what the narrator believes to be, what he has formulated, what comes to his mind as he peers through his window's pane and sees the limited experience of others. The stories are a creation, a manifestation of his own inability to traverse the world with anything but his mind and eyes. For the narrator, the battle is between the simple, natural world he inhabits and the more exciting, enriched, fictive world he creates. I would now like to look at the narrator as he is, as a poet, an artist, by bringing in philosophical ideas from Martin Heidegger's collected lectures on Friedrich Nietzsche. Heidegger considers Nietzsche's conception of the essence of art to propose 5 essential statements. Art is the most perspicuous and familiar configuration of will to power. Art must be grasped in terms of the artist. According to the expanded concept of the artist, art is the basic occurrence of all beings. To the extent that they are, beings are self-creating, created. Art is the distinctive counter-movement to nihilism, and art is worth more than the truth. Will to power, as many scholars have speculated, can be seen to have 2 generally accepted definitions. The first being an inherent desire for domination or mastery over others, oneself, or the environment. The second being the drive of the philosophical Superman to perfect and transcend the self through possession and exercise of creative power. Nietzsche is often misunderstood in his formulation. He is not advocating for power to be pursued, but rather praising those who sublimate the will to power into creative activity. The poet-narrator, however, is driven by a pursuit of power. Through his creation of an alternate reality, one with fictitious characters that embody his own internal struggles with time and human desires, he is trying to overpower the natural occurrence of death by immortalizing himself through his creation, all the while becoming caught in an indefinite recurrence of falling and rising. Reality becomes an augmentation of space and time, a representation of the moment defined as the present, but the present is not definite. Between future and past, the interval of the present is an extension of time that depends on the distance in space between an event and its observer, between object and subject, the signifier and signified. As Frederick Jameson says in Postmodernism, or the cultural logic of late capitalism, the waning of affect might also have been characterized in the narrower context of literary criticism as the waning of the great high modernist thematics of time and temporality, the elegiac mysteries of duration and memory. We have often been told, however, that we now inhabit the synchronic rather than the diachronic, and I think it is at least empirically arguable that our daily life, our psychic experiences, are today dominated by categories of space rather than by categories of time. In this passage, Jameson is stating that, under the pressure of organized capitalism, culture and its creations is being spatialized. In the case of Gass's short story, events are not happening in time. They are present in space, expressed on paper, on a flat medium. The subject is centered. The poet creates the words he writes, his poetry, his art, the characters around him, as a mirror of himself. He is recreating himself through an outward projection, an outward expression. He does not feel, he conveys feeling. He does not remember, he creates. We must, however, add that the problem of expression is itself closely linked to some conception of the subject as a monad-like container, within which things felt are then expressed by projection outward. The unhappy paradox that when you constitute your individual subjectivity as a self-sufficient field in a closed realm, you thereby shut yourself off from everything else and condemn yourself to the mindless solitude of the monad, buried alive and condemned to a prison cell without egress. In his Byzantium, the narrator's only truth is art. Art is truth. It concedes to the supersensuous. It denies the fated reality through metaphors that are set to create arbitrary definitions of a multidimensional, fictive reality, meant to immortalize him through his escape from nature, from genuine being through experience, toward his being through art. The narrator's creation becomes his prison cell. He formulated for himself what he thought would be a refuge, but turned out to be a containment for his own life, a container of his mortality, yet immortalized by Gass's creation, trapped on paper in an endless cycle of rising, only to fall again and repeat. He gazes out his window, but sees only himself in the reflection. His mind, his creations, are envisioned on the world outside of his reach. He is everything he envisions. Reflection of himself live in his every creation. It is himself that he mourns, as his will to power has failed, and death's fuse has already begun to burn.